much, everyone, for coming today. I am not Sebastian Payne. He is experiencing what I believe is known in the tabloids as travel chaos, but I am Charlotte Ivers from the Sunday Times and Times Radio, and I will try and do my best karaoke Seb Payne, maybe a little bit less of the financial side of the Times. And of course, we're joined by Andy Street, who is our host today, in a way, and I'm sure needs absolutely no introduction, but in case anyone hasn't followed his career, Andy, of course, used to run John Lewis, came into politics as the mayor of the West Midlands, and has had, I would say, a series of successes in that role. Most recently, of course, bringing the Commonwealth Games to Birmingham and bringing the investment and the legacy that that has provided. So I'd be keen to talk a fair bit about that with him as well. We're going to be talking about bringing investment into areas like this more generally throughout. And I will fairly soon, I would say, into our conversation, open up the floor for any of your questions. So do have a think if there's anything that you would like to ask Andy about. But Andy, should we start? Would you like to give us a broad overview of what you've been doing to bring investment into Birmingham and any plans for the future?
And first of all, you're not allowed just to talk about Birmingham. Otherwise the others in the room will call you out. So one of the key, and you might think I'm being jovial about that, but it was actually a very important point. One of the key reasons that we secured the Commonwealth Games was that the region came together to support it, actually. So in the events, then they spanned from Cannock to Leamington. There were more events actually out of Birmingham than in Birmingham. And that's, please, not to be interpreted as anything negative about Birmingham, but the whole point was we came together to argue for this, for funding of it, and of course then for building on the legacy of it. So that's been great. Now, has the Commonwealth Games driven investment is perhaps the we've been up to. And the answer is yes. Now we'll do the sort of soft emotional part and then we'll do the hard numbers. So any city has a brand. And I'm sure we've all got our impressions of Milan and Madrid and Brussels, and it's exactly the same for Birmingham and Manchester and Leeds. And if I'm honest, despite the fact the wonderful efforts of Councillor Mike Whitby, who was leader of Birmingham City Council in a previous iteration, did on the branding of Birmingham, and the whole story that Mike told was global city with local heart, there was something really, really powerful behind that. But it's always been hard work to really propel the brand of Birmingham. So one reason why we bid for the Games was we were determined to use it, in a sense, to move on the image of Birmingham again. And on the back of that, obviously, comes tourism, investment interest, and obviously the opportunity to host lots of events in the future. And categorically, that has worked. There is no question the impression of Birmingham is now better than it was before we hosted the Games. And then the hard numbers on it, we ran what we call a business and tourism programme alongside the Games. Now, interestingly, if anyone's thinking of doing this again, that was not in the core funding that we got from government. We had to separately apply for that through directly to Treasury. It was awarded, and then the programme was run between us in the growth company and the Department of Trade. And I can now tell you, because I know the number precisely, we have 1,282 business inquiries that we have to follow up, which is about 3 times where we were at the beginning of the year. So the fact we used our hosting of this to take our story out round the world, literally to Canada, to Australia, to India, to get inward investment inquiries, it's been a brilliant example of how you can use sport to drive an economic narrative.
I'm fascinated by what the actual mechanics of that looks like. So you're bringing in business leaders, delegations from all over the world. Are you wining and dining them? Is it PowerPoint presentations on the local economy and how it would benefit them? What do you actually do to get those through? Maybe with an example.
The answer is all sorts of things. This is going to sound like a very glamorous style of being mayor, and it isn't always like this. Usually I'm on the bus somewhere. But we did actually take our story to New York, Toronto and Chicago earlier this year as the Queen's baton went round Canada. We used the presence there to do the baton. And we took with us someone who the Brummies in the room will know very well, Yummy Brummie, our celebrity chef, Glyn Pennell, to actually cook for inward investors in Toronto. We took our effort to their finest hotel, the Fairmont, in the centre of Toronto. And it was a novel way of saying, actually, there's something different about this place that perhaps you haven't understood, all part of taking our programme out there. But a lot of it here was during the Games. We converted a building just on the other side of the square that we called the Exchange into what was called UK House, and we ran a lot of very serious, in-depth studies of our key sectors. And then we did literally out and about across the region to see where the investment opportunities were. So in Solihull, we hosted them at Arden Cross, we hosted them at our new Life Sciences Centre in South Birmingham here. So they were out seeing the practical investment opportunities.
And who are some of the companies you brought in? Who are your prize pigs that you've managed to secure?
Well, okay, so let me just say, over the last 5 years, we have been leading the country in inward investment. So there was already a good pipeline there. So I don't want you to think we were doing nothing and then the Commonwealth Games came. But, and the biggest name that we secured last year was Goldman Sachs, and they chose Birmingham rather than Solihull or Coventry or Wolverhampton as their headquarters second headquarters location. And literally just Wednesday, they then talked about increasing their space up to 110,000 square foot in the city, which anyone can work out is enough space for about 800 people. And they initially said, we will just have 100 people, but to the theme of it all, because they found real good quality recruits, they've now basically said to us, there is no cap on the number of people we will recruit. Anyone you can provide of the calibre will have a job, and we think we're there. We're already employing for them more people here than in, get this right, Dubai, Milan, Madrid is becoming a real hub. The big announcement during the Games, though, was actually from Accenture, who said they are also bringing an international hub to the city. And then if you look out to a little further away, we've had a whole clutch of announcements around this electric vehicle technology piece, which is based on the sort of area between Coventry and Solihull. So companies obviously like Lotus came. We've already had the London Electric Vehicle Taxi Company here, and then recently Ola, Polestar have talking about making their vehicles here as well. So really exciting in that sector.
And looking towards the future, obviously Boris Johnson's premiership defined by levelling up key policy area. There's been a lot of talk about the idea that might take more of a back seat in the future, particularly with the public finances under such strain. Are you concerned at all about government investment into the area?
So, yes and no. Now, what do I mean by that? A lot of what we've done has actually had government investment at the core of it. They paid the Lions Bill for the Commonwealth Games. We've exploited that. They paid for our business and tourism programme. Again, the lion's share we contribute to. They always demand match. If all of those things were to evaporate, it would be hard. But the no part of the question is actually it's the private sector that really make the difference. And this is perhaps an important learning point. There is no way that the taxpayer can pay to deal with levelling up. They can sort of ignite it, and if we improve the skills and qualities of our workforce, we will attract that private investment in. And just to give you an example of the numbers, we've signed earlier this year a deal with L&G for a partnership between the West Midlands and them. That's worth £4 billion. If you add up all of Boris's transport investments, excluding HS2, the deal we've just struck is for £1 billion. So that one company from the private sector actually is paying more than our much heralded public sector deal. And it does just make you stop and think about where the real target is. And we're now seeing those benefits of that L&G partnership coming through. Just this week, it was announced a big housing scheme in Wolverhampton will be funded by L&G.
And what will those sparks look like then? What will you be asking for over the next few years from the government in terms of inward investment?
Well, the first thing we were asking for, and it's lovely that there are witnesses to this, by the way, I haven't just made it up. We were asking in our Trailblazer Devolution deal the opportunity we have to, with Greater Manchester, put forward our asks, in a sense, ahead of everybody else. The first thing we were asking for was this idea of levelling up zones. We're sitting just along there is the start of what I describe as Britain's most successful enterprise zone, which we were awarded in 2013. The whole remodelling of the city centre here, Paradise, and again, the public sector pays for the remodelling, the infrastructure, the private sector brings it to life. That is a brilliant example of how it works. So on the back of that success, we were asking for 4 levelling up zones in Wolverhampton, in Dudley, in Walsall as well, and then through East Birmingham out to Solihull and into South Coventry. We were asking for those, and then lo and behold, what do we find in the mini-budget? This idea of investment zones. They are basically the same thing. So again, if we can get at the front of the queue for those, that will give us a real opportunity.
The private sector itself, it does look like it's going to be facing a fairly challenging time over the next couple of years. We've got inflation, we're expecting the cost of borrowing to dramatically increase. Is that going to ruin some of your best laid plans? It feels a little bit nervy when I speak to big businesses, the type that you'd be wanting to bring in.
Yeah, of course, any business is going to looking at its business case for its investment, and if they've got heavy borrowings and rates go up, that's going to be difficult. As we were talking about, we were going to admit something now, as we were talking about over lunch, let's see. The interest rate move might not be as extreme as some are predicting, let's see. But what we can do locally is we can provide that certainty. Certainty in terms of the overall economic plan, certainty in terms of planning, certainty in terms of where these zones are going to be, because these are sort of 30-year rolls of a dice. And businesses always say to me, the thing they really, really want is that certainty.
Could I talk to you about housing as well? Because it feels like Birmingham is something, the West Midlands is something of a success story when it comes to housing, because you are hitting your housing targets. You are building on Brownfield.
We are.
That is not the case across the country. What is it that you're doing differently?
So I think the first thing to say is all credit to all our local authorities, because they are actually working together. And they work through this duty to collaborate to a plan which says, I'll take the example, Solihull has got to produce this many homes towards a target for the whole region. So we do have the numbers by each local authority. What we are also then doing, and I think all 7 local authorities of the West Midlands would be in unison over this, we're trying to find those brownfield sites, and sadly we have too many of them, derelict old industrial sites that we can bring back into use. Brilliant examples, some of the most polluted places in Britain, particularly in Walsall, in Wolverhampton, in Dudley, where we're able to bring them back. And our role is to subsidise where there is a viability gap in the maths, to subsidise from funding we've secured from government specifically for that. And you may remember that last year they talked about a brownfield fund nationally. We are currently, it's our next ask of them, seeking further funding to do that subsidy. If you take a place like Longbridge, and here we are, Simon is just the councillor just down the road from Longbridge. That place, despite huge efforts in 2005, made some, when MG Rover went bust, made some progress, but vast areas have remained derelict. And one thing I am very pleased about is we can now say a Conservative mayor working with a local Conservative MP, Conservative councillors have delivered that progress at Longbridge. The diggers are in the ground now, and that site is coming back to use for housing and for cutting-edge businesses.
Before I open up the floor to questions, brief warning there to have some ideas. Liz Truss, you of course backed in the leadership contest. You were marginally less enthusiastic about her on Sky News this morning. Give us a bit of a sense of...
Oh, you love to personalise it, don't you? No, so go on, I should let you ask your question, Charlotte, yeah.
Well, give us a sense of what you think she's doing right perhaps first, and then where your concerns are.
Okay, so we'll be very straightforward about that. So what I said on Sky News this morning, and I'll say it again now, is that I do believe that the idea of this more assertive economic plan is right. Because the brutal truth is that since 2015, our economy's underlying growth rate was weakening. And you can't, on 1% growth a year, pay for the public services that we want. We have got to do better. That is right. And some of the things she did in the last week, the cash for energy, that will put spending power into people's hands this winter. And of course, we've already talked about investment zones, the capital allowances for businesses, the reduction in corporation tax, all those things are right. What I did say on Sky News this morning, though, is I think where the problems have come are these quote-unquote rabbits out of hat and the politically completely unnecessary thing of removing the 45p tax rate. And if it was me, I would definitely not have done that.
And there are going to have to be spending cuts, presumably, as a result of the fact that we are seeing tax cuts as a result of pressure from inflation. The government aren't reopening their spending review. That is going to put pressure on all investment into places like the West Midlands. Are you seeing that already, or
no,
is that something you're seeing?
To be absolutely categorical. I know there's been a bit of talk about this, but we have not seen anything. And if you take the biggest area of public spending in the West Midlands, health, there is absolutely no change as far as I can see in what the government has committed to health. And if you ask people on the streets of Birmingham, that would be the number one priority that they talk about, and particularly catching up on the waiting list. So categorically, we've not seen anything. The other thing I said on Sky this morning is I think this is getting a little blown out of proportion, really. what Simon Clark, as the new Levelling Up Secretary, said, and I stand by it, and anyone who's run a big council knows this to be true as well. You do have to regularly look at all your commitments. Anyone who's run a big business knows it. And you have to just say, is this right? Do we need to trim, to change? And you have to keep doing that. I don't see that as a bad thing. I just see it as an honourable thing. But that is entirely different to a sort of return to serious spending cuts. That is not what I understand has been set about.
Final question from me. It's a horrible job interview style question. In the next few years, what are you most excited about and what are you most nervous of?
What am I most excited about? Yeah, I can answer that. I said in my speech in there that the whole question of climate change remains the defining issue for our times, really. And it's very easy that it gets pushed aside a little with the immediate present. But I am genuinely excited that this region can play a leading role in it. We've set ourselves a target of 2041. Just recently our plans were analysed very positively by those who look and give sort of gradings on this, and I can take you and show you lots of practical stuff we are already doing. And I'm actually very confident that we've got the sort of alliance of business, academics, political leadership across the political spectrum actually in this region to really step into it, and I don't think we will flinch from that at all, and that's a really important thing to do. What am I worried about? That our sort of moment of opportunity, which we've worked for decades for, frankly, the sort of business interest that we've got around the globe, might be weakened, not eradicated, but weakened by events which are beyond our control. We've worked bloody hard to get to this point, and I am determined that we don't fail to maximise it.
Fantastic, fingers crossed. Right, any questions from the floor? I think we've got a microphone which is wandering around. I'll start over there because the microphone's nearer to you, and then we'll go to you down in the front here.
Thank you very much. Hi, Andy. My question really is around devolution. So obviously, earlier I heard Liz Truss praise you for the metro rollout and the expansion of the metro across the West Midlands. At the National Convention, yeah, she sang your praises. My question is really about how projects like that go through phase by phase by phase. So much of a mayoral devolution model at the moment is dependent upon, as you said, going to government again and again and again to ask for new funding deals for the next phases and so on. What would be your optimal devolution model, and how can Liz Truss deliver to empower you to be a better mayor and continue to deliver for the region?
Well, Ian, who sits as leader of Solihull Council on the WMCA board with me, will, I hope, agree with this. We are constantly having to say to government, this is what we'd like to do, you mark our homework and give us our money. That isn't true devolution. True devolution is saying we trust you people locally to decide in the best interests of the region. Now, to be fair, we've done pretty well from this idea of seeking funding. I think since the WMCA was found, we've got about £5 billion of unique money that came on the back of that. But the real breakthrough is that we actually get a tax raising or tax retention power that then we do not have to keep going cap in hand, because then the full responsibility is devolved. It's a big step, but I do believe it's the next step, and I sort of believe we've earned the right to be trusted to it.
Thank you very much. Andy, as a small business owner, because of the Commonwealth Games and the fact that Birmingham has becoming a very attractive city to do business, my business is booming and I'm receiving national and international contracts.
Really?
My question is, what are your plans to continue improving the great name that Birmingham is gaining, because that is crucial for small businesses?
You're absolutely right. So I'm delighted with what you say. But I will answer your question head on, but I'll just tell people this. One of the other things I'm really pleased with the Games for is they had a source locally policy. Now, you can't source everything locally, let's be honest, but 70% of their expenditure went to a company that had a West Midlands presence, being very precise about that, and that was really important. And again, HS2, we're on exactly the same gig. We're trying to make sure that SMEs across this region get the contracts from HS2 as well, and Ian and I have been working on that. But to answer your question, and actually I didn't answer half of something you said earlier, the next thing we want in our Trailblazer devolution deal is actually cash devolved around inward investment. At the moment, we've managed to put together this fund, especially for the Commonwealth Games, but we don't have a long-term subsidy for inward investment. They do, by the way, in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Westminster money diverted through there. That is not a level playing field, and that is one of the breakthroughs I would like us to get to. So we've got that subvention, you might call it, for those inward investment discussions.
You mentioned HS2 a couple of times.
Yes, I'm a great believer in HS2.
It's always the thing, isn't it, when economic times get tough, that the newspapers start saber rattling on and saying it's got to go. Are you confident in the future of HS2? Are you getting the whole thing?
Yes. And anyone who wants to be confirmed of this, take a walk down to Curzon Street Station or Arden Cross. They've dug up half of Warwickshire, frankly. So the London-Birmingham link is genuinely beyond the point of any question. Now, we have still got to make the business case for the links north of Birmingham, so to Manchester, and then on to Nottingham to the east. And, you know, I'm not kidding myself. That's still going to be a hard thing to do in these tough times. But there is definitely a business case, and I believe the government are utterly committed to it.
How confident are you, do you reckon, on the further investment out of 10, maybe?
Out of 10, confident? 9.
Okay.
Yep.
Not bad.
9.
Not bad. There we go.
9.
Excellent. Should
Yeah.
we go
Because
over
there's a strong business case.
over there and then. Okay.
Hi, Andy. Mango.
Yes.
Andy, can you tell me about the legacy of Commonwealth Games? So you talk about it. What is the legacy of Commonwealth Games? That's the first question. And the second question is, when are you going to start the metro from Wolverhampton to Maryhill?
The second question I can deal with very quickly because we've started. It's, you go to Dudley and you will see all the diggers in the ground and people are complaining to me about the disruption. So it's all happening. So I don't quite understand that question. But anyway, the legacy of the Commonwealth Games. 4 quick things on legacy. Of course, there'll be the legacy of the stadia and the facilities. They're there. The second area of legacy is, of course, the legacy of the infrastructure that's been put in place, new stations, the rapid bus routes, da-da-da. The third area of legacy is definitely this whole one about the brand of Birmingham and the West Midlands and how you sell it around the world and getting those businesses that are interested to commit. I'm literally out in India in 3 weeks' time selling that whole story. And the fourth area of legacy is the one we found the hardest, is the whole piece about the community involvement. And I hope that there'll be an announcement very, very shortly about a charity that we will probably call B22, on the same basis of the spirit of 2012 that was done after the London Olympics, which looks at how an endowment is invested in community projects to build community resilience. That announcement, watch this space. Thank you, Mango. Simon?
Thank you, and thank you for the shout out, Andy. Councillor Simon Rowell, I'm the Shadow Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Families on Birmingham City Council. You'll know something I'm very passionate about is skills and opportunity, in particular reaching the young and disenfranchised, of which, frankly, on the board of Longbridge, which I represent. What would you consider the best strategy with all of the investment we're getting, all the developments, all of these jobs and these opportunities that have been created in the region? How can we get these opportunities into places like Frankly and really target younger disenfranchised people to opportunity spread across the region?
Yeah, so this is a hugely important question because let's not be drunk on it. The success that we've had, there's still areas of Birmingham and indeed North Solihull and indeed the Black Country that don't share in that. And I think this is one of the hardest questions for us. The single best model I have seen for it is where we in the CA, or it could be the City Council as well, work with an individual employer to actually build up a training provision in a tough place, because then it draws the people right from that tough place straight into the employment. And if I could call out HS2 and what they've done in Bordsley Green, it is actually a role model of this, taking young unemployed people and saying, we will work with a college to do that. What we've done with Goldman Sachs, this will surprise you differently, they basically said, anybody who has got basic IT skills, we will work with you and them so that they then come into our institution. So we play the sort of gatekeeper role, and where I think there is much more ground is whether we can actually, with more geographical communities, set up some, might be relatively light touch, but some institutional capability to do that actual move in. We're trying to do it in Chelmsley Wood as well, but that I think is the very best example I've seen because it's practical on the ground.
The lady at the back over there.
Hi, I'm Kadisha from Cancer Research UK.
Oh yeah.
So when it comes to levelling up, health is a really important part of that mission. For instance, smoking is one of the leading causes of cancer and is also one of the leading causes of health inequalities.
Yeah.
So my question is, and in fact it also has a huge cost to the economy as well of up to £17 billion per year. My question is, what do you think metro mayors can do to help level up health and reduce that gap in healthy life expectancy as set out in the levelling up white paper?
Yeah, okay. This is a really hard question because as you well know, we do not have a formal responsibility over this. Unlike, you know, we're asked about transport and skills, I can say that's my job. But that doesn't mean that we're ducking it. But it is actually about how you use you asked me what I can do, and the main answer is how you use your convening power to bring people together so that they all address it in their area. And what we've done practically around this here is all the debate about health inequalities that were revealed in COVID between different ethnic groups. We were the people who pulled the honest research on that together, and I'll be slightly controversial, at a time where the national research frankly dodged the issue. And we then are working to hold each of the players in our system here responsible for playing their part in addressing it. So whether it's social prescribing in some of our tougher wards, whether it's the access to screening facilities in some of our tougher areas, we don't actually do it, but we can actually be that convener to help others play their role. And interestingly, there's much debate in our forthcoming devolution deal discussion about whether we should take on a formal duty over public health, because then it would make sure, again, that I'm not running a service, but it means that everything we do in all of our other areas, like healthy transport and our active travel piece, absolutely critical, whether that is all viewed through the health lens as well.
Hi, Conor McDonald, Policy Exchange. You've just been on a tour of a number of cities in North America. What are some things that Britain can learn from city policy across the pond?
Are you Canadian or American? You're Canadian. I'm going to get the right answer then. Okay. So yeah, we went. So I was telling you about how we did this on the back of the games, getting the brand out there. But for me, the moment of truth was in Toronto, when we went to their universities that house startups. And it was just an operation on an industrial scale. We went into this place in downtown Toronto that had 800 startups under it. And they were proud of the fact that every year about 80% of them would fail, because the other 20% were tied up with the venture capitalists who were also on site and then flied. That was an incredible machine that was producing companies of the future. And they were full of their success rate and how they were now pasting Boston in the medical and life sciences place, which historically would be considered to be the best in the world. And I just stood there and I thought, we are so far from integrating startups with academia, with venture capitalists. And that is what we are going to try to do in our small way. It was an incredible lesson to me. And by the way, no other British city is doing it either. We're not on our own. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I should not interfere.
Hi, Darren Moorcroft from the Woodland Trust. Andy, you're renowned for being a champion of the environment. So as a mayor, what do you think you can do in order to ensure that investment zones give the protection and enhancement to the environment, which, as a son of the West Midlands, I hope that you would, and I know many others, would want to see?
Yeah, this Ian, go on. You go first. You're dying to say something about this. If you don't mind, Aaron. You've heard enough of my voice. But Ian leads for us on environment on the board, so it's appropriate.
Councillor Ian Courts, I'm leader of Solihull Council, and we are promoting an investment zone at Birmingham Interchange, Arden Cross. And I was just waiting for someone to ask this question, because I know of the campaigns by RSPB and others about this. You know, our investment zone is based on having great green infrastructure, and to me it's part and parcel of a great development possibility. And, you know, there is an issue about some planning regulations could be simplified, but in terms of simplification in terms of the natural world, we will be doing everything we can to maintain our development green credentials in that site. And that's, I think, would be my advice in respect of all of these investment zones. We need to keep good green space for the health of our people and indeed to create better value for those environments.
I mean, Ian is going to be a champion on this, and I'm sure that's right and so on, but I will acknowledge that your question is a tricky one, because we've heard a lot about much swifter planning and throwing some of it away. And I am worried about that, because, and the reason I'm worried is I don't believe it's necessarily trying to solve the right problem. Our enterprise zone here was not the most successful in Britain because we threw away planning rules. It's actually exactly the opposite. It's successful because we did brilliant planning with brilliant public spaces. It was sitting in one there. So, and if you look at what places that offices want to occupy, you look at where places people want to move into, that whole green credential is absolutely critical. So I acknowledge the challenge in what you're saying. I don't know the answer yet as to what the liberalisations will be, but I share your view that it's got that really good green space has got to be incorporated into them.
You still? Behind there.
Andy, your enthusiasm is infectious, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, have you tried to connect education and what's going on in Birmingham's education system with your wider regeneration? I say that, you can tell by my accent, from a London perspective, where we found that that was key to the driving of what went right for London. And I'm just wondering, Birmingham hasn't got great exam results, and Solihull also, they're improving, but could be better. And I'm just wondering where you think you could make that connection.
Well, let's just get the facts right first. Solihull results are well above national average in the top few. And actually, credit where it's due, Birmingham results, even with all the challenges this city has, now has above national average results at both 16 and 18. Now, no one's complacent, no one's saying it's good enough, but it is wrong to say that Birmingham's education, full stop, is failing in terms of outcome results. What is failing is there are a lot of outstanding schools, and there's a tail of extremely poor schools, which is not being tackled. But just on the outcomes, it's only fair to say that. And actually in Coventry, the results are now also above national average. So 3 of our boroughs have above national average results. Now then, where this all connects up though through the education, where we are responsible, is we're not responsible directly for schools, but we are responsible for the post-16 system in Maine. And where we've tried to get the connectivities between what are the jobs and sectors of the future and what are the courses and programmes being offered in our colleges. And I know when we're winning, when we sit down with a college principal who shows me their curriculum plan and shows me how it is being changed to meet the future jobs. Now again, we're not making enough progress, but that process is going forward, and the government's local skills investment panel, the idea of that, which is new policy that's coming, is it really forces that link between business and what's required with then the provision of those skills. And it's the right thing to do, and we are hoping to take again a leading position in that. The one other piece I'd put on the table where we definitely are failing is the whole careers service. It is incredibly fragmented. It's good in some outstanding schools. It is really, really poor in most of our average schools. And I don't think the provision that's very haphazard at the moment is right. And we want to move in to a responsibility for a West Midlands-based careers service, which sets a standard in our weakest schools, because that's where so much goes wrong.
I reckon we've probably got time for one or two more questions. We got... I know. Yeah, should we do down the front then? And then at the back? Go.
Mike, I think it's you.
Blue seat over there, yeah.
Thanks very much. First of all, Andy, just a quick shout out for Birmingham City University STEAM House. It might not be at Toronto's level, but it's certainly great, some great incubator space, and it's infancy at the moment, but yeah, I think it's along those lines. So that's the first thing. Second thing, just in terms of climate change and specifically retrofit. So that's the big challenge. I mean, you've very kindly owned a future homes development site that Midland Heart did in Birmingham, the first in the country. That's great for new build, but retrofit's where the real prize is. How can we line up our skills to make sure that we can take full advantage of that?
So this is a fascinating question, because I just talked about us providing course programmes through our colleges for where the jobs are of the future. So we decided we would put cash available with our colleges to provide retrofit skills. I think 3 of our colleges, Walsall, Wolverhampton and Solihull. And what happens? Young people don't apply for them. And that is really telling you something about the lack of confidence in that market. So actually, it's not so much about, are we providing the technical training? It's much more about, is the market gathering momentum? And that's what we have to tackle. And that's why, I mean, again, I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, but we announced on Thursday the first of our net zero neighbourhoods in Dudley to do this at scale. We've got programmes in Solihull, in Coventry, in Birmingham, of different funding mechanisms from government. But what we've got to do, and again, it all goes back to it, another of our debates with government at the moment is about devolving that total cash that's been allocated so we can get moving at scale. Then the youngsters will see the continuity of it, and then we'll get the skills developed.
One final question in front here.
Thank you, and I'd add to that continuity of funding so businesses can skill up for that. Question, Andy, on devolution, and I mean the public sector is not always good at joining up, yet in the West Midlands Combined Authority, we have joined up a number of things. Do you think there is real potential for in the devolution package for more joining up of services, public services, for instance, at local level? I mean, education was a good example.
Yeah, it's a really important question, this. This conversation has drawn out the areas where we haven't stepped into it. And the natural thing is to say, yes, go and do that. But I am very wary of the running before walking piece here. And I think that we really have to concentrate on where we can make the difference. And the answer is not always that we say that we step into that. That doesn't mean we don't join up, though. And I think the question about health drew this out very well, that you can influence, you can come together with a regional plan, even if you don't technically change the power around it. I do think, though, that there are 1 or 2 areas that are perhaps politically controversial, and if people are fishing for this, I will say it in front of witnesses. I do still believe that this region is held back by the separation of the roles of the Mayor and the Police and Crime Commissioner, because in most big areas, metropolitan areas, they come together because it is the 2 sides of the same issue. So I hope we will be bold enough to take that step in one of the deals.
Well, thank you so much, Andy, for speaking to us all today. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I will let you get off to the many and varied drink receptions, which I am sure you are all desperate to get to. And Andy, thank you again, and thank you for having us.
Thank you for stepping in.